So I would say it would go on pending that the contract is done. I don't think there's any guarantee within, you're talking Friday and then, 3 days, because you only got like 3, 4 days. So I say pending on the deal, it may not. We can push them, but
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeremy's pretty quick. I'll get it from him, and then I can send it to the attorney tomorrow.
okay. I'm just saying, I just want to make sure on the deal, because okay.
Thank you. Okay.
What's next?
Where's the, you're in charge
Who's
now?
running the visioning
Me?
workshop?
Mm-hmm.
I'm in charge of the visioning.
Yeah, you're the
I
mayor.
thought that was CRA.
No,
Oh.
it's citywide visioning and strategic planning.
Well, no.
This was going to be a visioning meeting.
Uh-huh.
It's a workshop,
Right.
part of the council,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to start it off with the water system. Because the truth is, we are running up against our capacity with water. This is really an extension of the workshop they had in 2005, where they recognized that they needed to put in a new well field, and then it sort of just died off. And then we're back on with our growth and with the need to develop on 441. We have always recognized, and that's the reason we have the well field out there on 188, is that in 2005 they recognized they needed this well field. And then I'm going to turn it over to Tim, who is the expert.
Good evening, Tim Norman, Midtower and Associates. Y'all should have a handout there, but as Mr. Booth says, we're going to talk about your water system. I know most of our efforts since we've been working for the city have been involved with the wastewater system. A number of projects going on with that, but it's now time to kind of look at your water system, and there's some issues there that will need to be addressed in the relatively near term. First, I'd like to kind of give you an idea of what your current situation is. Your water system is basically several components. There's supply and treatment, which are your wells and your treatment plant. You've got storage tanks, and you've got your transmission distribution system that gets the water out to the customer. So we'll kind of talk about each one of those separately. First, on your water treatment plant, it's located there on 441, consists of two 600-gallon-a-minute wells. DEP rates your plant at 1.4 million gallons a day max daily flow. Water plants are rated based on how much water they can pump out in a day's time. Based on the actual capacity of your well, your plant's probably really should be a 1.728 million gallon per day plant, but DEP says it's a 1.4 million gallon per day plant. One thing to consider, one thing as engineers we look at is something called firm capacity. That means that's the capacity of that system with the largest unit out of service. If you have a well to go down for whatever reason, a well pump broke, well collapse, contamination, whatever the case may be, you only had one well, that cuts the plant capacity in half then. So we like to have a firm capacity. We like to have one unit as a standby and everything. That's why we put two pumps in a pump station. We don't want to rely on one pump. If that pump fails, then we can't produce any water. So your firm capacity of that plant is 864,000 gallons a day. And you'll see there on the last sheet of your handout there, we went and looked at the most recent flow data for the plant. And you'll see there, we're kind of showing you where you're at capacity-wise. If you look there at your percent of current rated capacity, that's the, typically on a water plant is based on maximum day. We assume that average day is roughly half of that. So if you have a 1.4 million gallon per day plant, on average, for average day flow, you look at 700,000, roughly half of that, because there are days when you have a very dry period and everyone's irrigating, the flow goes up, or if you have a freeze protection, everybody's running water for freeze protection, you have high usage. So on average day, your plant's a 700,000 gallon per day plant. You can see you're running it in the last year, averaging over 80% capacity right now. So you're getting up there to the point that you need to do something to increase the capacity of the plant. Again, you get a similar number looking at max daily flow. If you'll shift over a couple of columns, you see percent of current rated maximum daily flow capacity. In September of 2018, you flowed at 1.136 million gallons on one of the days. So that's versus compared to a 1.4 max day capacity, you're at 81%. So again, you're starting to bump up on that capacity to the point that you need to get in planning stages to do something to increase that capacity. Fortunately, your treatment process is relatively simple. We pump it out of the ground. We inject some chemicals. We inject hydrogen peroxide, something that the city's recently started doing for disinfection byproduct control, the trihalomethanes you've probably heard about, which has been successful. We add sodium hypochlorite for disinfection, and we add what's called AquaGold, which is to prevent corrosion in the system. So basically, we pump it out of the ground, add 3 different chemicals, and it goes into the city's system for use. As far as your storage, the main storage is the 250,000 gallon elevated tank here in the center of town. One thing with elevated tanks, they're nice and they provide you some storage, but it also limits the pressure you can be at. You can only increase the pressure so much till you fill that tank, then you start to overflow the tank. So we can never increase pressure beyond the overflow elevation of that tank. So we have situations where as we have new customers on the new developments at the periphery of the system, we can't raise the pressure for them. We're limited by what's in that elevated tank. There are ways to get around that, but that's just something to keep in mind. Your system pressures typically range from about 45 to 51 in the tank. You may have periods where it's less than that in high usage. If you had a fire in one area and they were opening fire hydrants, the pressure in that part of town may drop significantly, and you've probably experienced that as well, situations where you had inadequate pressures or fire flow on certain things. So those are things that would need to be looked at. The last component of your system is the transmission distribution system. Unfortunately, your system, a lot of it is old. Most of it's older than 50 years old. You've got old cast iron pipes. You've got asbestos cement pipes. You've got electrical conduit that's been used as water lines. Most of your valves don't work, so it's a real problem when staff has a water main break or something like that. They have great difficulty shutting off the water to be able to fix the lines. So eventually, you're going to have to replace your water system out there, and it can't be done in one thing. It's just too expensive to do in one fell swoop. So it may be something that's done over a period of time and phasing. Now, we did a project a couple years ago that replaced water mains in one area through a community development block grant. We've got another one that looks like we're going to get funded on. Of course, it's DEO. It moves slowly, but that one will be coming in the near term. And the CDBG grants are great. They're 100% grant, but the area being served has to meet a certain income requirement. So you're limited as to where you can do that work. It has to tend to be in low income areas, the only place you can use those funds. So another situation you've got, one thing to consider, your water system as in all smaller towns, they're built from the inside out. You start with the water tank in the center, and as you get out to the end, there's less water needs, so your lines get smaller, typically the further you go from the center of town. Well, that's all right until the town starts growing beyond those limits, and now we've got larger developments out there that can't be served by those small lines, so we need larger lines to be able to get adequate pressure throughout the system. What we look at doing is basically looping a system around the periphery of the city of larger mains that will increase pressure inside the city as well as make higher pressure available outside the city. So that transmission system there, again, could be constructed in phases. That's something you have to look at down the road to get adequate flow to all areas of the city and all areas of your service area. One thing, again, what we're looking at, and this is just conceptual, this is kind of our ideas on what to look at. Well, obviously, there'll be lots of consultations with city staff on exactly what they want. But what we're thinking, as Mr. Booth referred to, there's a parcel. If you'll look at the map here that's in your handout, this parcel on the right-hand side, which is the Suwannee River Water Management District property. That's been set aside as a potential well field for both High Springs and the city of Alachua. We propose to put some new wells in that area and basically build a redundant water plant there, something similar to what you've got now. which would double your capacity and also provide complete redundancy. If we have a situation where we had a water main break, the 12-inch main on 441 breaks, there's no water in town, period. So you had a redundant water plant. If you had a lightning strike that took out all the electrical stuff, you'd have another plant there that could provide water to the system. So it's nice having two totally redundant plants instead of just relying on one. If you had in case you had a catastrophic failure, you'd still be able to provide water to the residents. So we'd look at doing that and probably run a new 12-inch water main into town on a different route there. So we're on a different road going in. We've got a redundant pipeline to feed the city there. So, only downside of that is there's two water plants to operate. It's one instead of two, but we'd incorporate telemetry and SCADA, which is a fancy word. You're going to have all kinds of internet and things like that to know if a pump's gone down or whatever the case may be, and staff could be alerted to go out there and address the issue. So that's taking advantage of technology to reduce labor. As far as storage, again, we could continue to use the elevated tank in the center of town. We'd look at two alternatives, doing that or taking that tank out of service and potentially putting in smaller booster pumping stations around different areas. See what might be the most cost effective. If you have booster pumping stations, you can dial the pressure in wherever you want it. So you can increase the pressure, whatever. Again, like I said, with the elevated tank, you're limited by that elevation. But with a booster pumping system, you can bump the pressure up if you wanted to and operate the whole system at a higher pressure. We have to be careful doing that with existing pipelines. If you raise the pressure, the pipes start coming apart. So we have to be careful of that. So, but again, those are things we would look at in evaluation. As far as your transmission distribution system, as I said before, we'd probably look at doing that loop system around the perimeter of the city, giving you more reliable delivery and better flows and pressures. And that would allow us to serve any new developments that might be coming in, which you've got a number of those that are in play or moving forward. We've already done a computer model of your existing systems that would use that computer model to size the lines and see, try to optimize the system so you're spending the minimum amount of money to get the results you need. And as always in these things, as developments come in, we would look for developers to pay to extend lines to their development. There may be some developer agreements. They get some cost recovery if they spend the money to extend the line, and someone connects to that line in the future. They get reimbursed for the cost of putting it in there. But we try to do as much of that as we could to keep the cost off the existing ratepayers. Again, those are all things we're going to kind of look at. Of course, the big question in all this is how do we fund all this? So there's a number of different sources out there. Unfortunately, there's less grant funding for water projects than there is for wastewater projects. So the state revolving fund is a potential funding source. They'll give us loan money. That won't be an issue. Their current interest rate's about 2.4% for a 20-year term. The city's only eligible for 22% principal forgiveness is what they call it, same as just think of it as grant funds. And the reason for that is your population and your median household income is higher than a lot of the other cities you'd be competing with, so you get a lower percentage of grant funding. But that's probably the best program for you all moving forward to fund the bulk of this. The first step in that is a request for inclusion, which is a little 6-page form we fill out with some basic information we have here. Get you in line. They look at it and say, yes, we will fund the study phase and the design phase, and then you go back to them after that for the construction dollars. So another funding source, again, as we said, is CDBG, Community Development Block Grants. We've used those in the past. But again, we're limited by the income in the areas. You're currently eligible for $700,000 CDBG. After this next cycle, after this one that's coming up here this year, they're going to shift to $1 million for each one, because they've realized with the dramatic increase we've seen in construction costs for everything, you can't do a whole lot for $700,000 anymore. So they're realizing that they need to have more money toward these projects. So there'll be fewer larger projects with CDBG funds, but that will help in the future, allowing us to do larger areas. Some other things, there's the Swanee River Springs or river funding. Unfortunately, with the Springs funding, they're wanting to see either we're reducing water consumption or we're improving water quality. And unfortunately, these projects really kind of do neither. We're not really improving water quality. We're actually wanting to get more water to serve, future development and things like that, and we're not really improving water quality. So it's going to be tough to get funded under those. We have seen some funded for water main replacement, where you could show that there was dramatic loss of water, and by replacing water mains, we're going to save water. there's potential there. We have to be able to document that, though. In the past, the city's had USDA rural development for your wastewater system. Right now, with your median household income, you do not qualify for any grant funds from RD. So they'll provide you loan funding, but they won't provide you grant funding. There's a lot of hoops to jump through with rural development. There's a lot of upfront soft costs that are associated with that. So we think the SRF is probably a better program for the city. Their interest rate's about 3.75% compared to 2.4 for the SRF program. But the only advantage of rural development is they'll finance it for 40 years versus 20. So there's an advantage of stretching it out, but I'm not sure it makes a lot of sense to finance something for 40 years. By the time you paid it off, it's starting to wear out anyway. So there's always legislative appropriations. Of course, they're very iffy. You never know what you're going to get from year to year. You never know. I think this year, most appropriations are going to go to the Panhandle for the hurricane. So most of that money is going that way. So there's probably not anything this year, and who knows what it'll be in future years. So that's a real hit or miss thing. You can't really plan on anything using appropriations. The last potential funding source is impact fee monies. The city has some impact fee monies for water now. As new developments come in, and again, we formulate this for the new plan, obviously it's going to be, we're talking about spending millions of dollars on your water system ultimately. So we'll need to relook at your impact fees, what you're charging new developments, new things coming in, instead of the low amount that it is now. That number will probably rise dramatically, so we'll be able to capture more money from developers as they want to connect to the system. So that will help defray some of that cost. And those monies can be used to pay debt service and things like that on expansion as you collect those. Kind of the last thing to look at again is this exhibit again. This is outlined in blue there is kind of a proposed potential water service area. Again, this is the city's decision how far you want to go. I mean, you can make it as big or as small as you want to go. Of course, you're limited by county boundaries. It's not really good to go outside your county to try to serve. There is an agreement with Alachua here. We've drawn this line over here. That's the competing entity. So those discussions probably need to happen soon, but we're both on the same page as to what's High Springs service area, what's Alachua service area. Because when you're doing utilities, it's he who gets there first serves it. It's kind of the way it works. So if each community gets into an aggressive situation of wanting to serve more areas, then you can get into some conflicts there. But it'd be nice to have all that ironed out. This is our service area. Obviously, we need something to plan from. We need to know how big an area do we want to serve ultimately, so we can give you an idea of what the cost will be for that to happen. So again, this is just a first cut at this. You all can certainly go further south if you wanted to. And what we show here, you might want to go a little further north. It'd be nice to get that interchange there at County Road 236 and 75. But interchanges are always nice. There's always a lot of demand at interchanges. So they're usually pretty good customers if you get up there and serve them. So, but again, that's something that we can work out with staff and certainly bring before you all as to how big an area do you ultimately want to serve for the city. Do you want to stay very close to your current limits, or do you want to go outside and expand? So that's something that you all would need to make a decision on. So that's kind of the overview of where we're at. And like I say, the first step in this is to if you all want to move forward, is to we think to do an application to the state revolving fund. The request for inclusion is not a very complicated document and not very costly. So that'd be the first step. And then after that, of course, we'd come back to you each time for if there's additional monies to be spent as to what you want to do. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
So you indicated the impact fees can be used for expansion and extension, but not to do that replacement of those deteriorated lines.
No, it has to be for expansion. It has to be the impact fees are collected that the system needs to be expanded. So that the interior stuff is more of a maintenance thing. It's not the developer's responsibility to pay for old lines in older parts of the city.
Okay.
So that's one river management district property out there, the Lachman High Spring. So you're talking about building one plant, two plants?
Well, we would build one. This is
for High Springs.
Just for High Springs, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so Alachua won't be able?
No, because they don't want to be part of it.
That's what I was coming to.
And the attorney will write them a letter making sure that they have turned down the ability to join us. Because back in 2005, when they established the 5 acres that were going to be our well field, they were included. So it was the High Springs Alachua well field, but they have in the last last few years, but here just recently in the last month, both the mayor and the city manager has indicated they did not want to join, that they were going to just leave that to us. But we'll make sure that the attorney writes them a letter and gets a response, because when we go back to Swanee River, we want that in hand so there isn't any communications between us and Swanee or miscommunication.
There's nothing to say, depending on what Alachua says, there's nothing to say that you all couldn't share a well field. Obviously, if the city builds a water plant, that's the city's water plant that serves the city. It doesn't serve Alachua. But there's nothing to say if Alachua changes their mind that they potentially couldn't share a well field, and they have their own wells out there. The city has its own wells.
That's right. That you can't separate.
Yes, separate. Which you would certainly want to do. You don't want to be, that would be good.
Do you have any ballpark idea how much replacing those existing deteriorating lines?
Millions of dollars.
Okay.
It's millions of dollars. It's an ugly number.
You don't want to talk about it.
If you did it, actually did it one time, it would just be ugly. So what we need to do is again, as the city grows and you get more customers, to spread that amount over more and more customers over time is the best way to deal with it.
Because I know that's been an ongoing problem for maintaining this system, the compromised lines. Isn't that right, Rodney? That you can't keep the pressures, and you can't keep sometimes the flushing out. It's a problem because we have compromised lines.
Starting sewer projects, where uncovering water lines that we didn't even know were there. We're gonna have a big map, we're updating all our maps.
And what's bad is none of these things are going to get better over time. They only continue to get worse. So it's not something that you can just bury your head in the sand and say, well, I hope it gets better, because it's not.
It's not going to happen.
It's going to get worse. And every community is in the same situation we deal with. Everybody's got infrastructure that's 50, 60, 70 years old, and it's just worn out. And, it's a big pill to swallow to try to go in there and fix it all at once. So it's got to be done.
And Bill is over there hiding somewhere. Bill, we've had a conversation about the need for a new well because of not being able to serve fire suppression and additional commercial growth. Isn't this a key piece to getting commercial growth?
Well, the capacity we have now in various parts of the city, it doesn't meet the fire flow requirements for many commercial buildings.
Right.
It's also not meeting the fire flow for some of the proposed developments that are coming in. And, I have to sit down with the developer and explain to them we don't have the fire flow, so they'll have to take and go back to the drawing board in their subdivisions, and they'll spread the houses out so that reduces their fire flow. That's kind of what we're facing right now.
Right, but if we want to draw commercial on that 441 corridor, we don't have the ability to do it.
I don't have enough flow up, help me out, right past the cemetery. The old cemetery on 441? Yeah, I don't have enough flow from there towards Alachua to build a Walgreens.
Okay.
I just don't have it.
So it limits our economic development.
It is. I mean, it's something this city needs to do, and we've got a bad water system throughout the city. It's an old city. Many cities are facing the same thing, and this is an opportunity I look at, and of course Ed is tired of me saying we need water, but it's an opportunity to where we can gain economic growth through new construction if we do these well fields, and that can offset the cost of repairing and taking care of what needs to be done within the city limits, within the downtown city also. As Tim said, there's many ways to pay for it. One thing that I've been involved in the past are pioneer agreements with developers. They'll come in and put the lines in and pay them back, and it's up to the commission of how they set those contracts up on payback on that initial investment by the contractor. But that's a very viable thing that goes on every day. That can offset some of your costs. Right now, we looking at the city, and he says it's an ugly number. I don't think it's an ugly number because I look at it as potential growth for the city. And this is not a 2-year plan. This is gonna take a while. And what would you think, 10 years to revamp this system?
At least.
Yeah, so it's gonna take a while. So if we put a well field in the next 18 months or so, we'll start seeing development on 441. I have, and Ed does too. We have people call weekly, and we can't service them. But you can get the commercial corridor on 441 going back to Alachua, and that can offset the cost of the rest of it, and paying for what you're doing now. And there's other cost factors, I'm sure, with Swanee River and things like that. But if you want your city to grow and grow in the right way, you've got to have the water. We don't have enough water.
One thing with developments that are going to create jobs, this is not residential developments, they don't count.
Right.
But you get economic development monies to build infrastructure. So if you had a situation where someone's going to come in and create a number of jobs, you can get up to about $1.5 million to extend water lines for fire protection to serve that development. That can be 100% grant. You've got to be able to create the job. The only downside is it's DEO. They move much slower than the developers want to move. So that's the problem. The developers want to go now, and it's a year and a half process for them to go through all their paperwork to get the grant in place to do it. But that's another possibility.
Well, like we just mentioned, opportunities for jobs and growth. And we look at things a little different in 2019 than we did 20 years ago. We don't count population, we count rooftops now. They do. They do. I mean, that's what when Publix came into Alachua, I was very involved in that, and they never asked anything about population. They want to know how many rooftops. They're looking at how many residential dwellings you have, and they do their calculations based off of that. We're getting there.
How many rooftops do we have?
How many rooftops we have?
Yeah.
More than 2 and less than 100,000. Our population now, though, is about 62. Is that right, Ed? Something like that.
62.5.
But this year alone, 2019, we'll probably see. I've got 24 in the ground right now. We'll probably see another 100 houses total this year. It's a lot. It's pretty quick growth for the city. We're looking at over at Bailey Estates. How we doing? How we doing at Bailey Estates? We're kind of getting there. The capacity for residential. So we've got 82 acres over there.
88.
Yeah, and if they try to develop it with the densities they're using in Bailey right now, they're not gonna be able to do it. We don't have the water. We don't have the fire suppression to support it. So that's kind of what we look at, and we face this on a daily basis, believe me. And you talk to people and you say, I'm sorry, not much you can do. We don't have the infrastructure. I personally, as a resident of the city, not as your building official, I'd hate to see this city get into a situation that I've seen many get into, to where you're not proactive in getting something done. Now you got to be reactive, and you're going to be on a time clock to move. That's when mistakes get made. That's my opinion.
I do, and excuse me, understand that we have a Dollar General coming down on 441
Right.
at Edgemont.
Right.
On the other side of the ball field.
Right. There you
That's
go.
fine.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. But you understand what's getting ready to happen on 441, and we won't be able to bring in the bigger retail establishments if we don't have the water to supply.
Yeah.
And you know, when most citizens think of water, they think of potable drinking water, which we have to have that, but we have to have fire suppression water in order to bring these businesses in. And we're not talking, and many times we're not talking about big businesses. If we wanted a Shan satellite office in here, there's no way I could do it.
Right.
No way. You know, we don't have the capacity for suppression. That's what we face. That's what we're facing. And I think, in my opinion, if we move ahead with this and developing that field and getting the water, we're just that much ahead of the game. Not much, but that's okay. I'll take that. Because as I said before, as commercial development comes in, the pioneer agreements can be struck about putting water lines in, and the impact fees, some of our impact fees can be put towards water. All those dollars can start paying for the repair of the system in town, along with paying for the debt on the well. That's kind of how I look at it.
And this issue should have been addressed a long time ago. It's so important. It should have been addressed 10 years ago. But it kept kicking the can down the road. And a lot of people didn't want no economic development in town. I'm so happy you're saying this. Are you recording this, Virginia? And it's so important that we start to focus on growth. I don't know if y'all watched the Super Bowl. It was a commercial about West Point, Georgia. The Kia plant. Yes. Me and Ada went to visit there. That place is smaller than High Springs.
Yeah.
Smaller than High Springs. But that town, economic-wise, is doing wonderful. Facilities is doing wonderful. They ain't got enough people to work in West Point. They got to go around over the city. But we need to start making a plan now.
Right. We have
Start
to do something.
looking ahead instead of looking
We have to.
backwards.
We have to get
it's so much.
jobs.
And like I said, it should have been done 10 years ago. 10 years ago.
Oh, I don't disagree with you. It needs to be done.
And
I can't
commercial
stress that
businesses
enough.
are going to bring more tax revenue because these homestead exempted houses don't create the tax revenue that a commercial building is going to create.
No, and it's true, but talk about development and the city as a whole, you're going to increase the quality of life of your residents tenfold.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about drinking water. I'm just talking about general quality of life. Because if we have the facilities the way we're growing right now, we'll see a satellite clinic coming here. It'll come. There's enough rooftops to do it. We just don't have the infrastructure to do it. That's improving the quality of life of your residents. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen. A lot of things that can happen. So, and it's not an ugly number.
No, the old infrastructure is an ugly number. He was talking about the old pipe replacement. That's what he was talking about.
I don't think that's an ugly number either, because that's something we can phase in as we go through. I mean, it needs to be done.
Got to have a plan to do it.
Exactly. If it's planned correctly and methodically attack this thing, it can be a great thing. It really can be.
And I hear so many citizens saying, why women sometimes want to say, y'all need to come to the meeting and see why things don't come out. You just say, okay, come on, whatever industry. It don't work that way. It just don't work that way.
No, absolutely not. And with where we are now with the expansion in our wastewater plant, our capacity there is fine. We're fine. We have a generating plant out here for power. We're okay there. And oddly enough, just as a side note, we're using less power these days than we did 20 years ago. So that's good. But anyway, we have those capacities. The only thing we don't have is the initial thing, and the most important thing is water. We don't have it.
So, y'all the experts. Where would we go from here? Get this ball rolling.
We need the request for inclusion, and that's what we'll start. That doesn't obligate you for any money at this time, and then that starts the ball, and when we start spending money in that, we'll come back to you. Somebody will come back.
Before you start spending money, come back to us.
Right.
Well, I'll be here.
Right.
Should we public comment?
Aye.
Let me,
Ross.
let me.
Yeah.
I'll be very
He
quick.
did get a haircut.
Ross Ambrose. I think it's really appropriate you're having this presentation before a visioning meeting because, as Byron referred to, and I believe the only person that was in the room was Ginny at the time, about 10 years ago, a commission had voted to increase the water rates, specifically the base water rate, because we weren't charging enough compared to other communities, and that money was going to be set aside in a fund to improve the water. And an election happened, and the first thing that happened was the new commission rescinded that increase.
Right.
of that money that was supposed to go to improve the system. They kicked the can, just like Byron said, down the road. Not only that, I believe it was at the same meeting or the next meeting, the engineering firm that they had picked came forward and said, okay, we've tested this field, we've done our sampling, you need to put a 6-inch well down and you need to start drawing water off of it because it takes so long to get a municipal well permitted and online. And you can say whatever that timeline is. And that was just a test well at 6 inches. And it was like a done deal. It was like the gentleman shows up and like here, and the commission goes, no, we don't think it's a good day to spend money on that. We're not going to do it. And it's never been before the commission again as a serious item for getting that well field online, and it's been kicked down. And really, you know, you need to really understand what the timeline is to get a DEP approved well online and be running as many multiple paths as possible. Because I know the last time the wells were pulled and the shafts were inspected and repaired and whatever, and how bad they were at that time. And I think an inspection is probably coming up again. So yeah, I want water in the city, and you need to look at your revenue sources, and you need to make decisions and commit to it and commit the city dollars. And quit looking for studies. This has been on the table for a long, long time. And Alachua a long, long time ago said, we're not interested. So that's my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm. 14 years ago. 14 years ago.
And we still didn't move.
My biggest concern is the commercial. We can't have commercial growth. We can't have commercial growth and no jobs and no commercial base until we do something about the water. It's a critical piece to us having any kind of economic growth for our people. Right. Right.
So now that getting where the wastewater is almost, it's a year or two away that pay for itself, then that all that money goes to pay for the water fund. That's $100,000.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
And as part of this process, before the city borrows any money to do any infrastructure, the entity you're borrowing the money from is going to force you to put rates in place that they're going to be able to pay the debt service. I mean, no one's going to loan money if you don't have the ability to repay the loan. So all that stuff's going to happen. And there's going to be rate increases over time. I'll tell you that right now. There's not, you can't get 100% grant for this.
That's right.
There's going to be water rate increases. And of course, they're going to look to you all. And as you said, it's always a nice political club to hold over somebody and say, well, if I get elected, I'm not going to raise your water rates. You know, that happens all the time. I see it in every community.
Yeah.
You know, so it's and that's something that you all are going to face. That's just part of the deal.
That's why I say we need to inform the people why we do things. We just going to raise rates just to say we're going to raise rates. If you want to see the town grow, I like to put it this way: you got to spend money to make money. It's just the way it is. And the more people you got on the system, the better we are.
So in this workshop, then can we make a motion to do the request for inclusion, or how do we do that next week?
I'll go ahead and request the engineer to do that.
Okay.
Then I'll come back to you when there's any money.
Right, then we can
Yeah,
discuss.
this is more of a paperwork drill,
Right.
but we have to get it in now.
Right.
Couple thoughts.
And probably somewhere soon, we'll ask that the infrastructure fund then get changed and restudied,
As far as the impact fees.
the impact fees.
We need to have some figures worked up before we do that.
Yeah, I know, that's-
So a couple thoughts. You do this thing and you come back and not do whatever, it's going to cost money up front. Whatever the deal is, I think we need to know, so she can sit there, because you're going to have to do some finagling, because the budget's already done for this year, and you're going to have to find money. I'm not doing a downer, folks. I'm just saying, I'm just talking reality.
Yeah, right.
So we need to have a realistic of what you anticipate the costs are going to be through this fiscal year so she can start figuring out how to do it. Because it's one thing to sit out there and say, we're going to file for something, and then when the bill comes due and you ain't got the money to do it. So I think that's the first thing I would say. And I guess I'm going to disagree, and but take this in the right way. If we do this solely for economic growth, I think it's the wrong reason. We need to do it simply for the survival of the city for where we are now. If I'm a citizen in a household and we've got developments coming in, forget business. We ain't supplying water to people. We're not going to be able to supply water to people. We're not going to be able to fully expand the developments we had because we're not going to have the water pressure and so forth to do it. I guess what I'm saying is before we start worrying about if we're going to solicit business because of this, we need to make dang sure we're taking care of the people who are here now and we're providing water to the people that we've already obligated to. I'm not saying don't do it, but understand me, if we do it solely for business, then I think we're taking the wrong tack.
No, it's not solely for business. I think
Well, that's what I'm hearing.
No, we need to attract business in here to pay for it. And that would increase.
I'm not disagreeing, just follow me with what I'm doing. What I'm saying is we got to be able to tell the people that live in the city now that you're going to have water 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And if you take the current water lines and you take the developments that the annexations that we've done, I don't know if you can provide water from what you're saying 20 years from now to tell people with the current water lines and the pressure.
I won't be able to do it in 3 or 4 years.
So all I'm saying is, maybe it's a moot point what I'm saying, Bill. What I'm saying is the urgency to do something isn't dependent on bringing in business. The urgency to do something is to do what should have been done and other cities are doing. And then the business is a collateral type of thing that comes with it.
And I agree with you. I think the urgency, and I'll just say it hard, it's the survival of this city the way it sits right now.
I mean, you need to do it now. I want to know where I'm living that 10 years from now. I ain't got to worry about them shutting water down and Rodney coming over to my house. And I'm not trying to make light of it.
No, I'm not either, because I think it's a very serious thing.
We're all saying the same thing.
If we don't develop a water system, we won't have the city that we have now.
Well, and then it's going to come back to the same thing in Byron on the deal and this one here. It's going to come back to the same thing where we're at with the sewer. And I'm not trying to bring up bad things. The thing sat there for 3 years and nothing happened to it. And now we're a year away from being self-sustaining.
Right.
Hard decisions had to be made.
Exactly.
This, and I would agree as far as the education on the deal, as far as doing to make sure people understand. I still firmly believe, and I don't believe in stuff. You know, I mean, I'm a conservative. People, what do you call it? However, I do believe that if you can sit there and tell them, I'm going to raise your water rates, and I'm just going to do a number.
Sure.
$2. I'm going to raise $2 on your water rate every month. But that money is specifically going for this. I think most people, if they understand that their money is going for a specific job, that this is going to be replaced. You got corroding water lines. You got this, and you're going to do it. I think most people will buy that. What people won't buy is when you arbitrarily raise the rate without designating where that money is going. We need that money just to pay for services.
Right.
I could be wrong.
The amount we raise the rates can be offset by new construction coming in. That's kind of how we're trying to balance this thing out.
I'm with you. But if it doesn't come in, I don't know if you can sit there and now follow me, and maybe I'm wrong, and you're going to have to educate me, and you and I'll sit down.
Okay, if it doesn't come in, you raise the rates, and we run a water line down and we bring it down to the city, and raise the rates, and that will take care of that. When it does come in, we'll go into, and it's my suggestion, go into a pioneer agreement with the developer. They pay for the lines. They pay for the water coming to their subdivision, but guess what? They also pay the rates.
Okay, I'm with you. I don't think you go into this project with the anticipation that we're going to have businesses going to pay for it, and it doesn't happen. You don't allocate money you don't have. If it happens, I think that's a godsend. What I'm trying to say is either this project is doable because we have to do it to exist. Forget the business. Forget it. To me, that's a bonus. That's icing on the cake. Now, maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way. What I'm saying is either we need this water system, we need to replace the pipelines, which we do.
We do.
We've done that's a no-brainer. We've known that, and we've been doing it. All I'm saying is I think this thing has to be sold to the mere fact that we have an antiquated, just what Matt was talking about. You sell them on the fact that this is the deal, folks. It hadn't been done in 50 years, and if we don't do it, the whole thing's going to go to heck. And this is what we got to do. Then if we get businesses that attach on, to me, that's a bonus. You follow do you follow my logic? I'm saying the same thing you are, but I don't think you depend on this.
We're not depending on that.
Okay.
We're looking at the offset cost.
I get that. Okay.
That's.
I'm with you.
Right.
I just think when you tell people, I think they need to understand this is the state of where we're at. It's just like where we were with the sewer. This is where we're at. We need to do something.
Right.
This is more important because without water, we ain't going anywhere.
No, Jennifer stated a minute ago, in a couple of years, the water, the impact fees will pretty much go to water. So that's a huge chunk.
But remember what he said, you're not using it for fix that.
Right.
You can only use it for expansion.
Which we could use it
But
for the
that's
new
what-
well.
But that's
We
a
could-
huge chunk of what we're doing.
We could use it for a new well. We could use it for the new mains, yeah.
Food, whatever.
Right, and
that's it.
just to clarify, which I think Mr. James is referring to, when we go to borrow money from these entities, it's based on your existing customer base. They don't care about, we're going to have 500 new homes in a year. They don't work that way. The payment is based on your current customer base because we can have another 2007, 2008, and all the housing goes to zero and all that stuff. So they're going to look at saying your repayment has to be based on your current customer base at the time of the loan. So that's something to keep in mind. You can't factor in, but we think there's all this potential future growth that's going to happen. They're not going to go for that. So,
And that
No
was someone
stated
set the rate.
income.
and that's what they set the rate.
Okay, so you ain't going to do this now. But at what point in time are you going to lay this baby out from a timeline thing that you do this one here and you go? Because the people, I mean, we need to be able to adequately advertise this and inform people as to what we're doing so they know. And I think if you do it the right way, I still think people are willing to pay if they know it's for the betterment and it's just not some whim that you want to spend money on.
There'll be, as part of this, there's the request for inclusion, kind of gets us a placeholder there. This is how much money we think we're going to need to do this. The first step in this is the planning portion. There'll be a facilities plan document, a nice thick document you're going to see. It's going to have all the maps and all the costs and all the phases, all be laid out in a document. There's planning money that comes from this. That you can borrow that money or you can pay it directly from city funds, however you want to do it. You can borrow that money. You're going to get some grant funding with it, so it probably makes sense to borrow the money. You'll have a document produced there that will lay all this stuff out. These are the phases, these are the costs, these are all the things there, and that's what you'll base your decisions on moving forward.
Now, one thing we haven't talked about is the current well field. There, oftentimes, there's only one pump going because the other one is off. We're one pump away from not having water, you know, and I lose sleep every once in a while, knowing that, and so does Rodney, when there's only one pump. We're one electrical storm away, we're everything, but, you know, and we have pulled those pumps and we have surveyed them and TV'd it, but
I guess you're making my argument that I'm trying to make is the necessity of this is not built on 10 years from now. It's built on the fact that it needs to be done now.
That's absolutely correct.
The urgency of it is not
good to have, but
is
this
not
is a
down the
necessity.
road. And I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. You sell this on the fact that we got one well. Talk about the pipes. Tell them where we're at, and let the people know this is where we're at. The other stuff is, like I said, to me, is icing on the cake. If you get it, the urgency now is a necessity of doing it. Should have been done. We haven't had enough discussions on it. I thought we were, but we need to roll. So whatever we need to do. I'm gonna be alive a long time. I ain't going down to the river and drinking that.
That's because you drink that good hot springs water.
Yeah, that's right.
Rodney tells me it's okay, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah, all right.
Yep.
So what do we do?
Well, we'll get going on putting a request
Right.
for inclusion together. That's the first thing. Again, that's not we can basically do that at no cost to the city. So
Right.
subsequent things, the subsequent things, there'll be a cost. So they're,
Will you be able to foresee those costs?
oh, certainly. Yeah, we give you a
Because
better
we
idea.
need to be able to do this to where she can start moving things around, because other things are gonna happen, and she's gonna need to be able to know.
Yeah, we can
We
give you an
can't
idea
print
of what the cost will be.
And then
But a lot of these are moving slowly because we're probably talking about next year's budget, which starts in October.
Well, the
Yeah.
requests for inclusions are due in June. They have, DEP has their hearing, and that's when they'll say, here's your money for planning and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Then you'll have the money in August, probably, is when they'll allocate the money.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and then the impact fee study, when do we need to look at doing that? Because that's a pivotal piece of this whole picture.
we need to have our financial stuff. We need to be able to show you this is what the costs are going to be.
Yeah,
And you need
you'll
that
do
information
that.
to put into the study. So we have to
Okay.
do the study for it.
But we also
Right.
Okay.
Complete that one out.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
And get,
Make it
But you have to
sufficient.
flip it, once it's done, you
we
can
get
no
that,
longer.
yes, Mr. 7 what we have to, yes.
We all have to flip it.
Right.
And then we'll leave that to,
Mm-hmm.
we can use that for
On.
bond.
Right.
That's okay, but it can be used for that.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you for this
Very
wonderful
informative.
packet.
I can actually understand those terms.
Right. Thank you.
You leaving?
To mine. Oh, oh.
No, they have to be out at the projects early.
Yeah, these are long days for you guys, I
Yeah,
know
I know.
that. Okay, our next item is, and we did not start the meeting. Do we need? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Next item is discussion of future goals and objectives. Anybody have?
So water's been a big one. I know
Right.
we've all
Right.
heard water. That's
Yeah.
been an ongoing. Another thing is roads and maintenance of the roads. We have approximately 10 miles of unpaved roads, is what Mr. Booth tells me. So that is something, he does have a plan loosely in place, but more importantly, the deteriorated roads that haven't been maintained throughout the core areas of the city, whether it's Patricia Gardens or the northwest neighborhood or up in the northeast over 441. And so it's like nobody's even done anything with the roads, and that's a complaint that I hear all the time. It's about the roads. And I know personally, walking around on these roads, it's like you can't do it because it's not safe. You know, the roads are in bad shape. So I'd like to have a conversation about roads and then about attracting economic growth and what our focus is, because we don't have a focus. We just kind of, and I think Christina has a presentation, right, for us? So.
Christina, you want to give that now?
I actually have three pieces. They have the two master plan projects, and then it leads into the economic. I don't know how we want to do that. Just at any time, if anybody has any questions or anything, it should be more interactive, especially the last part is the economic development part. So just to give a little bit more of a background, I know this kind of seems like an organic process because usually we're used to seeing like designs and conceptuals brought to us to vote on or to look at or to think about. This process is going to be very special because it truly is a community-centered approach. And so just to give a little bit of background, it all started, initially we were talking about the pavers and some of the areas downtown and the lighting and different things. And we realized not only, with the lighting, but also we need irrigation. If we're going to upgrade landscaping, So it kind of all came together, and then we saw this image, a historical image of downtown, probably around the 20s, I would say. Anyway, so the first question, everybody was like, where is the palms? So it kind of got us thinking, you know, how beautiful, you know, those Washingtonia palms in the 1920s. So from that, we knew we needed professionals because, I mean, to do any kind of landscaping, you know, you really need to upgrade irrigation. And I know following the conversation about infrastructure, this seems a little light maybe, but on the other hand, I will say we're getting businesses in already from like places like South Florida and the Keys. And so I think we're on the right path. I mean, as these property values increase, of course, our revenues will increase. And so anyway, so of course, we put out our RFQ in December, and we had identified 2 qualified firms. And so we've broken them apart. The Market Square one is actually next. This one here would be the Main Street concept plan. And so at this time, we need to start identifying, you know, who our steering committee will be. We really need to get, you know, broad community involvement. It's likely that these will be the same folks maybe for both projects. That's okay. But what matters is that we have these 2 defined phases and projects specific to, you know, what we want to achieve. So the things we need, like, okay, so we've got the kickoff already for Market Square, but this is coming down the road. This one actually, you know, we're maybe looking at doing a similar process maybe in the spring, like April, May, getting started, maybe getting some conceptuals in the summer. So that's much farther down the road. So that's just a little bit about that. This is just the timeline, of course. You know, we identified these needs. We put out the RFQ. The CHW was selected for the, of course, the corridor study, MLH being for Market Square. And then these are just some of the steps that we'll be looking at here in kind of a very rough estimate of time of how to achieve those. So Market Square, of course, is the one that we talked about tonight. And so just in general, you know, we were talking about the need to kind of define the space and to begin to, you know, really kind of draw back. We've got, you know, this pavilion coming online, and how can we, you know, not only increase the lighting, but, you know, kind of give our own brand, our identity. So, of course, this is the area that we already talked about earlier tonight. And these were just some of the ideas that they had, just kind of, you know, they've done a lot of due diligence. They're definite storytellers, so it'll be a very interesting process to take part in. And again, this is just a mention about our design charrette. So, and as far as economic development, you know, once we have these infrastructure improvements, it's very important for us to be thinking, who do we want to attract? And there's a number of tools out there that you can use to kind of help identify and define who we are, who we want to be. So typical analysis will look at everything from demographics. It's a definite plus that we're so close to the university, because a lot of times, you know, with research industries, with research, there's a lot that feed off of being close proximity to educational institutions. You know, everything from, you know, and transportation and housing costs, that's very, very huge, because in terms of an employer locating, a lot of times they want to look somewhere where the cost of housing is pretty low, is definitely a plus. And then, so the first of the tools that was used was the location quotient. So this is a calculation that looks at, so say there's a particular sector we're interested in. I know there's been a lot of interest in the community with environmental and scientific types of industries. So to calculate those, you would just look at the change for the particular industry and the total employment in the area, and then it's divided by the total employment in the United States and the total United States employment in that area. And so you get this, so anything over 1 is going to show a specialization, a lot of concentration in an area. So not surprising, and these are just some very basic, this is just to kind of get us thinking about some things. These calculations take some time, and some of these industries, you know, are very basic, but these were the top ones that showed up. And so I used our top industries and compared them with Alachua County, surrounding counties, even looked at some cities, Newberry, Alachua, and Mount Dora, just because similar attributes. So, not surprisingly, retail in a lot of communities in Florida seems to be pretty high. And so everything that's red shows a greater concentration. So that shows some sort of a specialization in a particular local context. What's kind of interesting in Alachua, Gilchrist, and Columbia, we have a lot of healthcare in the area. These are things that we could try to, as a community, we might decide, how can we service those industries? Is there a secondary market that we could be servicing? Kind of looking at areas like in terms of agglomeration, what can we do more efficiently because we have a concentration of these things in our area. Very surprisingly, Alachua has a very, very high manufacturing. I believe it was 2.67, which is very high. So that was pretty interesting. So some further things we can do later on that we'll look at, like our economic growth, our specialization. These are just some formulas that are used to calculate that. Once we identify what it is we really, really want to hone in on, because there's so many industries. I mean, there's literally thousands of things we could look at. So anyway, these are things we could do. So the takeaways from this, I think the next discussion, there's been some interest in the community about having like an economic development group. If the sectors that are of interest, if we could identify those, and then also think about how we could fit in, do we want to fit in? Do we want to do our own thing? Who are we? So these calculations will help kind of uncover all of that. And then, to ask, what would the next steps be? Is there enough interest for us to do like something particular to this? I know the water, the infrastructure being so huge, but, when we're looking for these things, what are our long-term goals? Who do we want to be? Who do we want to attract? So, that's pretty much it.
Thank you very much.
We'll get back to the infrastructure real quickly. There are 10.1 miles of unpaved roads. But when I first got here, there was 20 miles. We have done most of the long roads. The majority of the roads that need to be paved are in the northwest portion of our town. We've pretty much taken care of all the others. We have a sewer project going in there next year, and right after that sewer project, then we should go ahead and do the paving. Maybe 3 or 4 miles. That'll leave us 4 more miles to do, and then we're pretty finished. Part of the 10 miles are rural roads, and there's not enough housing on there to really warrant being paved. The city, though, has real needs, and Public Works is probably the greatest. They have no home. They're under the water tower, or they're over here in the double wides. Their vehicles are everywhere because there's no concentrated area. We have 174 acres over at the sewer plant, and they're going to start taking the trees down, which that leaves us the land to use. And sometime in the near future, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, we need to do a pad, to do an enclosure so they can work on their vehicles, someplace to park them, someplace to call home, really. The fire department was taken care of, and the police department, they're in a building that was built in 1932, or 1923, I'm sorry, 1923. We need to look, if you talk to the police department, they like the land right adjacent to them in that field. They like the idea of being behind City Hall.
Do you know how much space they might need, just projection-wise?
Probably most of that field.
Okay. You don't have a square footage number?
No, we haven't even gone that way.
Because it's about 150 a square foot on the commercial construction. So
we're probably a few years away from that. And then construction costs may change, but in a few years they need to start looking for a new department in that. As we bring in more houses, more ad valorem will come in, more need for police will come in. there's always that between 6 and 10,000. There's a lot of needs, and you're really looking for some commercial to help pay for it. But you're at that point. It's better to be there than not to be there, because the city either grows or it dies. And you can look around this county, and I'll give you Waldo and give you Hawthorne. You know, there are cities that aren't growing, and they're really going the opposite direction.
Are there any other areas? The police and the public works are priorities.
Those are the priorities. Fire department was worked on just a few years ago, and I think they're large enough now to take care of a city between 6 and 10,000.
Do we have any other comments from anyone else's suggestions?
I mean, I guess I would just comment, I would agree with you. At some point in time, you're going to have to blend that in to the prior presentation we just received from water.
Yes.
And the issue is going to be is blending that in. What's it going to cost? Where the money's going to come from? Because you're going to have this going over here. You're going to have employees. I agree. You're going to have to add employees. One of the things as you do,
I know,
when you increase your homes, you're going to have to increase your workforce.
Right.
It's a delicate balance,
mm-hmm.
and I hope the next guy's got a firm handle.
I hope so too.
And I don't say that joking.
No. Otherwise, you'll have my phone number. You can always call.
We need a firm handle, because I said as you're talking about moving this department, $1 million. I'm assuming, I'm just going to throw a dollar out there. You're going to have to blend that in.
Yes.
And so when you start having that many capital improvement things to do.
Now you have a plus because the sewer isn't costing. And that is the #1 project that most cities have a problem with, because they can't afford to do the sewer. Water does pay for itself. I mean, we've been paying both sewer and water out of that one fund. So what will happen is, as soon as the sewer starts paying for itself and making a little bit of profit, we'll move that money back into water, because for the last 10 years, the sewer system's been living on the water system. But I agree, there are a lot of needs.
You're saying it's easy to state what you need.
Yes. It's harder to pay for.
But you ain't printing money.
Thank you. That's why.
And so there needs to be, at some point, I'm assuming this would bleed over into the next city manager. I mean, there has to be something going forward, because you're going to be adding employees to do things. And you're going to be giving employees at times raises because of the economic type of thing. So there's a finite amount of money that you have to work with.
Right.
With what we're talking, some major things. I grew up in Gulfport. A good friend of mine is the city manager. They reached a point probably maybe 6 years ago where we're at. Their entire water and sewer system was kaput.
Mm-hmm.
And literally it was put up or shut up. And they had to go and they did the whole thing, and they had to bite the bullet. So I'd say at some point we need to figure out, I think the water is the deal. We need the
right.
Water. But I think you need to lay it out. Otherwise, as Byron said, we'll be talking about this 2 or 3 years from now on the building, and nothing happens. There needs to be some sort of plan. The next person, you'll be gone, but you'll be able to talk with them.
Well, I will also write out a plan, and it will take you for the next 5 years.
I mean,
I'd say that Russians used to have a 5-year plan, but this will be the High Springs 5-year plan, so that the water will be the #1 priority, and from there we'll work in the other But keep in mind, we're a city in almost Florida that has both fire and police, and no other city has that. So you are carrying a pretty hefty load.
Agreed.
Does anyone in the audience have any comments? Hi, Ross. Exactly. Exactly.
Ross has a lot of oil. If you're interested in grease,
Yeah.
10,000 gallons of grease.
Easily. One of the things that I thought was really innovative years ago in Chicago, that Mayor Daley Jr. put in place, which actually saved the city a ton of money, was anytime they planted a tree, the cost of that tree included an endowment to maintain it. So even when the city is in as much trouble as it is, there's an untouchable endowment for trees, because that was a priority within the urban area. The same thing is, each alderman has so many miles a year that they get to repave, and they get to designate within their district what to repave. But they can't, the city won't repave any street until every affected utility says we're not going to have to open that pavement for X number of years. So the gas company has to come in, sewer, water, which are city of Chicago. But if water line breaks under that pavement, they're charged back, and streets gets money from them. Because, so if you're going to pave a road, even if you're not replacing the water main, if you need to put in new lines to the homes, whatever, you do it. And so that was part of their visioning. It saved them a lot of money. They're still in trouble, but it saved them a lot of money. And, you know, I hear you talking about ugly numbers and millions of dollars and what's our priority going to be. You've already decided to invest millions of dollars into your parks. And yet I don't hear anybody talking about that fitting into the economic development and visioning of High Springs. So, yeah, we're going to work on a trailhead for a bicycle path, but our playgrounds, our ball fields are way above what any community our size has. How do we leverage that? Because we're spending millions of taxpayer dollars on those things. You know, you already bought the land right next to Memorial Park. It's now going to be next to a Dollar General. And there's already, I believe it's $400,000.
That's right.
That's been approved to develop that land. Parking and all that kind of stuff. There's a new playground being built down there right now. It's going to be gorgeous and different than the others. You know, so they're, you know, but that's $400,000 right there in that park that's going in. The new CBG grant for Douglas neighborhood, another $70,000 goes into recreation for that community as part of that grant. So all this money is coming into the city, and yet, okay, so, you know, do you add staff to the Parks and Recreation Department? Do you use that as a quality of life tool that attracts businesses to want to come here and have their families work in this community? You know, what do you do? But if you're going to spend that amount of money, let's maximize it, because right now, that's committed. That's happening. You know, there's new bathrooms at the Civic Center. There's a handicap play area that's been funded, that's going in, you know, back towards the BMX track and that area. So there's all this stuff happening. The citizens know about it. Does the website reflect that? Have you invested in the website so when people look around, our own citizens are away? Can they find out information about any of these things? So I'm encouraging you to look at that and use that as a tool. And then lastly, commit to stuff. Because I've been to a lot of visioning meetings. You know, you've had citizen groups come up with ideas and different things for years. But where there always seems to be a hesitancy is, oh, we're a small town, that's really pretty, but someday when we got a lot of extra money in our general fund, maybe we'll do something like that. But there's no political will from the people sitting up here to commit to something and go, yeah, this will be good for the city in the future. In the same way a family might commit to a house instead of renting, or a family might decide to move to an area, because there's a job opportunity and hope it works out. You all need to make an investment in the community that we can look back and go, that was a good idea. So be willing to take gambles and try it.
Such as.
So on that note, I'd like to ask Jenny to pull something up that I'm going to bring up at a CRA meeting next week, okay? The wall dogs thing.
You forgot something.
I did.
Yes. We expect to see all of you over at the Civic Center Saturday morning. Frozen foot.
We'll be there.
You can walk, but that's a whole other thing. Yeah, you're good. Good. Well, I mean, Linda, you asked such as, okay, I would say an investment in the website
Yes.
would be something that would have a return to this, not only for the citizens to understand what's here, especially with a lot of new people moving in, but also people who are looking at the region. So the website would be one investment. I would, and you've heard me before, from the Parks and Rec standpoint, I would expand staffing so that we can fully utilize the facilities that we're paying for. That you've got enough people to really be innovative about the entire age range of people that are involved in the types of activities that we can offer here and activities in the community for that. And then really going with the CRA funds too, to do something with our downtown area. We're not going to level it. And, the historic National Historic Trust has all kinds of ideas on what you do with our type of downtown that is not outdated and is actually back in vogue, and that you really invest in those things that make downtown wonderful. There was an idea years ago to incorporate the water tower. Do you know that traveling around the United States to look at water towers is a tourism thing? Yeah.
Yeah. The painted
Google
water tower.
water tower art or anything like that. And so one of the people had suggested, and a mock-up was done, of a young child in a mask looking out, like in a fishbowl in a spring, off of the water tower overlooking downtown. Do you know how many people would have stopped to eat dinner here? Do you know how many people would have traveled to the area to have lunch or whatever to look at that kind of a water tower? And the water tower has to be painted every number of years. The company that does that does murals because there's a whole thing with a service contract. And they were like, it's only an additional to do what you want to do. If you really go full blown with that artwork, it would have been somewhere between another $80,000 and $120,000. And there wasn't even the political will to fundraise for it. There wasn't a political will to consider it. There wasn't a political will to even look at the economic development that would have done. But that would have been really cool. Look what happened when Mayo redid their water tower for a short period. If you didn't know that, it became national news a few weeks ago on what they did. So, those would be some ideas that you could do to make the best of what we have and build on our springs. Enjoy our good nature. That's a good theme, and that's really why a lot of people live out here. So besides the fact we're a crossroad, you can cross the river. A lot of traffic comes through here just because it makes sense. The railroad came because the springs were here, there was water. And there's also a place to cross the river.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ross is really right. In the recreation, that has come farther than anything else, even the sewers. 5 years ago, I was being beat to death by Jameson over playgrounds that were starting to fall apart, and now they're all new. So it's come a long way.
Actually, there was something on the Visit Gainesville website on the Instagram the other day about our BMX track. They had, did you know that Alachua County has a BMX track, and it was an aerial view, and they publicized that the other day. So the Visit Gainesville people did.
And it's actually by the BMX racing community. It's considered one of, if not one of the top tracks in the country. And a lot of, when they've had national
Hi, my name is Donna Bradbrook. I'm really glad to hear that you guys are looking at a roadmap into the future. And as Mr. Booth said, you know, a roadmap going out 5 years is great. I would also encourage you to look possibly 10 and 20 years out, because when you are talking about infrastructure replacement and not kicking the can down the road, when you're talking about road replacements and water utilities and even fire trucks, you're looking at sometimes 10, 15 years for those things. And those are all infrastructure investments and core services that you need to be looking at well beyond 5 years and into the future. And the reason why I say that is because I think it's really important from a balancing act, because you have to provide those services and those investments for your citizens, but you also have to be very careful about not raising your millage rate up so much that people who would be interested in coming here, or those residents who are here right now, aren't looking at other areas like Newberry and Hawthorne, or even across the line. If you look at some of the reports from the Department of Economic Opportunity through the state, there are flow reports of where your citizens are going for jobs and where your employees are coming from their residence to their places of employment. And if you look at Alachua County in general, as well as the smaller cities in Alachua, we get a large inflow of employees who are coming from Columbia, from Gilchrist, from Levy and the surrounding areas, because those taxes, you know, cumulative taxes are lower than they are here and in Alachua County. So there has to be that balancing act between providing that infrastructure and those core services, but also not pricing ourselves out of that market going into the future, where businesses and residents won't come here because the taxes are so high. And I will tell you, as a transplant from South Florida, you know, more than a decade ago, that was one of the big things coming into this area, was people were saying, why do you want to move to the High Springs area? I picked High Springs on purpose. But they were saying, you know, just go north of the river and the taxes are half as much. You can get as much land, if not more, for half the value. Overall, your total cost of ownership is less. So that's something that this commission and future commissions and future city managers are going to have to look at. And then the other thing is I would definitely encourage you as you go through this, whatever infrastructure you do in the future, there's a book out there called The Price of Government, which is a really good book to read. And it talks about the fact that citizens are willing to pay for those things that they see adding value. And so if you look at the referendums in Alachua County that have passed over the past couple of years and even over the past decade, those things that our citizens find value in, so school programs, wild spaces, public places, those are the things that the citizens are willing to vote in for, because they find a value in that and they see good return on their taxpayer money. So I definitely think that, as it was said earlier, you know, investment in your website is good. Also looking at increased social media, communicating with the citizens what you're doing, why you're doing it, and hopefully the minimal impact it will have on them financially, but how much they'll gain from quality of life in that investment. So I would encourage you to do that also. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nancy, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm going to bring this up next week at our CRA meeting. I've done some exploratory conversation with Doug Hancock from Signpro in Alachua, with Connie from the Chamber, Carol Richardson, who is the Alachua County Arts Council Chair, and then Christina Wentz. So there is a thing called the Wall Dogs, and it is a group of artists that come from all over the world and do a 4 or 5 day festival and do 10 to 15 murals that paint the history of the town or the message that we want to do on core building areas. And it brings an enormous amount of tourism for the event itself, but it brings ongoing tourism. Jenny, there's one that says Streeter, Illinois. One of the links is a little video, if you could play that. This was a recent one that was done like a year ago, I think 2017. This is, it's a long project. It's something that you plan 2 and 3 years out. Right now, they're talking 2021, 2022, because there's a lot of planning. You get sponsorships, there's a lot of coordination and a lot of community involvement. But one of the things that I've been over and over told throughout the years is High Springs has got the arts. We've got a lot of artistically minded people. This is a way we can draw people here and beautify our downtown CRA area as part of that goal. Not that the CRA would pay for this, but that it would be one of the partners in being a driving force for it. And so I think this could be a tool that could tie in well to what we're doing in our CRA area and kind of land us as the arts capital of Alachua County, where we have some really, really amazing art going on here and festivals that occur as a result of this. So.
Nancy mentioning the wild dogs brought up something that someone asked me. I've had a couple of people ask me about. I don't know if High Springs is ever considered a dog park. And what
It's in your 5-year plan.
is that right?
Yeah. We have to get more staff, right? To
Well,
maintain.
yeah.
That
Well,
would
we
be
have
one.
We have to find a place to have it first.
Yes, that's right.
I'm sorry, you have some places? Okay. I'll check with you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any more comments? I will entertain a motion.
Motion made.
Thank you all for